Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. The tulips here in the long borders are just getting going. And one of my favourites is this one, Abu Hassan. And we've got it dotted around. It's got this lovely coppery burnish to it. But occasionally you'll see this. It's also Abu Hassan, growing right next door to it. But it's got tulip virus. And that sounds like a disease and a problem. But actually to the gardener, it isn't. Now, modern growers don't like it because they can't predict how it's going to grow. And that causes all sorts of problems. For the gardener, it isn't really a problem. It sometimes spoils your colour scheme. And the plants will lose vigour as a result. But personally, I like it. I like what's there, so we'll leave it. Now, in tonight's programme, I shall be looking at Tulip Watch, but also the 3 gardens we made last year. That's the jungle garden, the formal garden, and also our shrubbery. Carol will be planting and sowing in her new garden that she's making just from seeds and cuttings from here at Berryfield. And Joe will be in the courtyard planting a clematis and also making a modern hanging basket. Now, last November the 5th to be precise, a lot of you, and certainly us here, planted a particular tulip. That was spring green, and we all planted it on November the 5th at 4 inches deep, with the idea being to see when it flowered. And then we would log when it flowered, and that way we could draw a map right across the country to see when spring arrived. Because spring green, and here it is a pretty good indicator of when true spring is here. Now, here at Berryfields, on Friday evening, April the 18th, there was not one single flower. But on Monday, April the 21st, we got our first. Now, to make sure that we're all using the same data, we haven't asked just for the appearance of flowers, but for when it's open like a goblet. So, for example, this one here is not quite ready. We wouldn't record that. But this one here, you can see inside, and it's still kept its goblet shape. That's when we want to record it. Now, the easiest way to do this is to go to our website. That's bbc.co.uk/Gardener's World, and follow the signs for Tulip Watch, and that will tell you exactly what to do. But in essence, it's simply a matter of recording the date and your postcode. And that's all we need. And the more data we get in, the better the experiment will be. At the end of our last programme, Joe and I said that we really must do something about the formal garden. Well, we have. And in fact, although we haven't done a great deal, it does look very different. We replaced the low hurdles, which felt quite wrong for a formal garden, with these taller trellis. We've put a brick edging around the outside, lifted the grass and replaced that with gravel, which we just bought from our local garden centre. Hey presto, you have a completely different space. Now, in the interim, these tulip, which are called Apricot Beauty, have grown, and they exactly pick up the colour of the brick and the stone. So the whole thing feels lighter, it's more defined, and simply just by doing these structural things, working much better. But the next change was based, I'm afraid, upon failure. We had decided to edge the borders last year with this little Lonicera hedge. The idea was to see if it would work. It's not really got established, it's twiggy, and to get it looking good, I think it needs to be taller than we want. So I've taken out most of them, and I'll take out the rest. I'm going to replace them with box. Now, I'm ready to put in the replacement box hedge. This is Buxa sempervirens. Now, that's a good-sized plant, but that's £4, £3.99, just for that plant. You can put in a much smaller one, which is, this is £1.99, £2, and that will quickly grow, and if you take your own cuttings, you can make these in about 2 to 3 years. But it's still quite expensive for a little plant like that. For £2 each, you're going to be running into hundreds of pounds. So the best way of buying box is mail order. Now, we got these from a specialist box nursery, and they're in batches of 25. Now look at the roots on those. Aren't they fantastic? And there you have good, strong plants. Now, if I just cut that open, sent through the mail, they're all falling all over the place, but they'll be fine. let's take one like that. That, 175. So you can see it's appreciably bigger. The root system shows that it's going to grow away really strongly, and it's a very cost-effective way of doing a hedge. And box is still expensive, so take cuttings yourself if you can. But if you haven't, start with healthy plants like this. Now, planting them is dead easy. They want to be not too close together, because they will get into decent size. But if I go in the corner there, without compressing the roots too much, spread them out, and go around like that. I tend to use as a reliable unit of measurement the span of my hand. That's about 9 inches. But if you go like that, now that may look too far apart to create a hedge, but any closer and your plants are going to be smaller, less healthy, and you won't get a better hedge as a result. So to keep that sort of spacing, and also it'll be cheaper. Now, one of the reasons that we've made this formal garden so relatively small is to show that you can do formality in a modest space. Truth is, you can do almost anything in a small garden, and the National Garden Scheme is a great way of visiting loads of different gardens belonging to ordinary people with lots of different ideas. And we went along to Balham to visit Anne Bernack, who's part of the National Garden Scheme, and within her relatively small space can fully express her passion for clematis.
When I came here, I knew nothing about gardening. I couldn't really tell you the difference between a dandelion and a rose. And in my other home, I had lots of hydrangeas. And when I was really aggravated, I used to go out and deadhead the plants. And that made me relax, which was quite nice. And I thought when I moved, it would be nice to have a garden, and it sort of developed from there, really. I absolutely love this garden because it's peace and tranquility, and an area where I have control of what I do, and there's very little aggravation here. The worst thing that can happen is that a plant will die.
The limited space has forced Anne to be clever with her planting. Climbing roses and clematis are used to add depth and colour.
Well, I love roses and clematis. Clematis are my favourite because they take up very little ground area. And you can grow them through other things, like camellias that are flowered early in the season, which gives you a longer period of interest, really. In this very small space, I have over 250 different kinds of clematis that flower almost all through the year. I think there are something like 8,000, I'm not sure, different clematis. So 250 is just scratching the surface, really. Clematis really enjoy being in containers. The early flowering ones and the evergreens are probably too big for a container, but if you have an enormous container, you can grow almost anything in it. Clematis like to have their roots very cool. They do not like to be baked by the sun.
Anne's obsession extends beyond clematis to every aspect of her garden. Everything has to be perfect, even her pots.
Every time a pot winks at me in a garden centre, I'm afraid I have to have it.
Anne opens her garden under the National Garden Scheme 3 times a year. And she has good advice for anyone trying to create sustained interest in a small space.
I think when you have a small space, you have to be very flexible and keep moving things around. It's a work in progress, basically, so you just keep moving things until you're happy with them and the colour looks right and the whole structure of it pleases you. And it's a very personal thing. Well, it's wonderful, really, because it's like a walled secret paradise where I can create something very beautiful, and it's just personal to me.
There are so many good clematis varieties available to add interest throughout the year and a shot of colour where it's needed. And that's what I'm going to use a clematis for here in the courtyard garden, because we've got this lovely rose that was here before I even started redesigning the space. It's Guinea and it's got really deep red flowers. But when it's over, well, this wall's a bit bare, there's not a lot going on. So I'm going to add a clematis into here. The clematis that I've chosen is this one, Bill Mackenzie. It's got lovely yellow flowers, quite large lantern-type flowers late in the season. And then it's followed by the old man's beard, you know, the fluffy seed heads. And it's really easy to look after as well. All you've got to do in spring is just cut it hard back, and then it'll grow back up through the rows again. So we're getting, you know, a really prolonged season on this wall. I'm incorporating lots of organic matter because clematis like quite a moist but easy root run, so I've got to give it a good start. I'm just going to angle it towards the rows, and it's deeper than it is in the pot, and then just backfill. Now, what's nice about this rose and the clematis is that they add height into the garden, and in a small space it's very important what's going on at eye level, and I want to bring some hanging baskets into this space too, but a contemporary hanging baskets, not the traditional type. Now, the idea for them came from this hanging basket that we did last year, and they're all succulent plants in there, and succulent plants are brilliant. Very little watering needed, and that's the key, because here we've got a self-imposed hosepipe ban. So hanging baskets, they do need a lot of watering, the traditional ones do, but by putting succulents in there, you know, they can cope with drought conditions, they can cope without rain for long periods of time. So as far as the actual baskets are concerned, I'm going to use these. These are sort of medieval shape and really quite interesting. I love the shape of them. I'm going to plant into the top, but then also plant in the sides as well, so you're going to be able to see them all around, a real 3D hanging basket. First thing to do is to fill it up with compost. And I'm using a multi-purpose peat-free compost here. And now we're ready to plant up. And in the top, I'm going to use some sculptural plants. I think I'm going to go for this fabulous Agave fillifera. Look at that. It's a spiky little number, but it's just such a beautiful sculptural plant. And next to it, I'm going for an Echeveria. It's called the Pearl of Nuremberg. Now, here's a good little tip as well. Taking the soil off the plants, I've just got the roots there, but to actually fix it in there, I'm using just some wire. I've bent it round so that when the plant goes in, with the roots and all, I can just push the wire in and just fix it into place and make sure that the roots are actually in contact with the soil. It's quite heavy now, but it's looking interesting. I like it. Right, it's going to go right here. Now, because the courtyard here is so sheltered, I'm going to be able to leave this out from now on throughout the whole summer, and then in the winter it's going to go in the greenhouse. But if you live in a colder part of the country, wait a couple of weeks just to make sure. Well, I'm really pleased with that. I think it looks fantastic and it works in the courtyard. Going to do another one now.
Well, here in the cottage garden, I'm just staking some of these delphiniums with Monty's homemade stakes because they're really growing rapidly at the moment, and if I don't do it now, it may be too late. These are the same plants that Joe sprinkled garlic granules around the other week. It's supposed to act as a slug repellent, and it certainly seems to have worked because the foliage is looking really healthy. Everything's beginning to clump up in here really well now, but there are two elements that are missing. Two elements that a cottage garden just has to have, and that is scent and structure. So I'm going to add a couple of shrubs that are going to give it just that. There are only a few shrubs in the cottage garden, and none of them are scented, unless you count this flowering currant, and we all know what that smells of. So I want to put in this corner, a Philadelphus, a mock orange. They're called mock orange because the blossom's supposed to smell just like orange blossom, tremendously sweet, and what's more, it wafts all over the garden. And the one I've chosen for this corner is Coronarius aureus. It's got this lovely, bright, limey green foliage. And as with all golden foliage, it prefers to be planted in shade. It really needs a shady position so its leaves don't scorch. So I'm enriching the soil with a really good compost. Now, it's fairly pot-bound, so I'm going to use a strange method that I gather they use in New Zealand. I'm just using an ordinary dinner fork, and I'm going to actually break the roots around part of this root ball before I shove it into the ground. That means they'll get off to a flying start. They'll make lots and lots of new feeding roots, which is just what you're after when you're planting a new shrub. Well, this is fine in the shade, but there are a few things that I want to plant in the sunshine. So, over here in this very sunny spot, I'm going to plant a couple of daphnes. Most daphnes really like full sun. They love excellent drainage, and what they can't stand is having the roots stagnating in cold, wet soil. So I think this is an ideal place. The one I'm planting here is Daphne tangutica. It comes from China. But the only thing about daphnes, the only disadvantage, is that the whole group of plants is poisonous. So just be careful when you're planting them. And the thing about it is, it's got the most delicious perfume. It's absolutely lovely. This is a daphne which is evergreen. So even in the winter, you're going to get some benefit from it. And it'll grow up to about a metre high.
Our jungle garden has come through the winter fairly well when you consider that none of these plants would really choose this situation. But the flesh is all gone and we're left to the bones. And the real boneliness comes from the bamboos, which of course do cope very well with our winter on the whole. But we can only fit a few into this small space. And bamboos are great at creating a wild effect. And to see them on a grand scale, we went down to Cornwall to visit Jane Rogers, who grows an awful lot of bamboos.
People think of a bamboo as something to tie their tomato plant to, but when you're actually amongst them, it's fairly easy to tell the difference between one particular genus and another one. I came here about 12 years ago, and the garden had got very wild and very woolly, and I had to make a grave decision as to whether I bought a new vacuum cleaner, which was badly needed, or whether a strimmer would be more useful, so I decided that the strimmer was the thing to go for. Then Chris came strolling in one day, and he's been here ever since. He's been an absolute tower of strength.
She said, "Oh, what a big strimmer. Do you hire yourself out?" I said, "Yeah, sure." Before I knew it, I was working here a couple of days a week, and I've been here for 11 years, 12 years, and I absolutely love it.
Sometimes people come very badly shod for walking in a woodland garden. I either lend them my Wellington boots or suggest they go and find themselves a more manicured garden where they won't get their feet wet. If you come in your pale blue high-heeled suede shoes, you're going to get them very dirty. Essentially, there are two different types of root system. This is a clumper, and you can see the new shoots coming out of this one. This is Fargesia dracocephala. Now, the other one is a runner. This is Philostachys propinqua, and it is quite a serious runner. And you can see the size and the strength, because they're very unyielding, these roots, and if they are determined to grow in the direction they've chosen, it's quite a difficult job to stop them, short of chopping them off and doing them a mischief that way.
And what we tend to do is to dig ditches around this type of bamboo. And as you can see, the rhizomes are actually starting to get into the ditches. So in the spring, we'll go round the ditches and then just literally just snipping them off.
This one here, this is a clumping one called Chusquea cooleu, and I think it's a particularly attractive one. There are good ones and bad ones, like with all plants. So I don't think you can really say that you mustn't have bamboo because it's impossible. They're quite shallow rooted, so you can see when they're going to run. You just jump on them and cut their noses off, and then they don't go anywhere.
I know that sassers can be very invasive, but on the whole, most bamboos are not a problem and are worth putting even to a very small space. And certainly something like the Philostachys will never get too big and is very easily controllable. However, if you're growing Fargesia nitida or any of its cultivars, I'm afraid things are looking a bit bleak because they are flowering. Now, you may think that the flowering of any plant is something to celebrate, but for bamboos, it can mean death. Bamboos only ever flower once, and not very often. Some of them every 30 years, some every 50 years, but Fargesia, it's every 100 years. And if it's like this plant here, where it's flowering all over, there is no chance of it surviving, because all the energy is going into the flowering. It practically defoliates, that will die back, and then the rhizomes will die along with the culms. Now, whatever you do, don't cut it back. If it's only partially flowering, it may survive, so don't chuck it out. But it will take at least 2 or even 3 years to recover, so be patient. The good news is that you can collect the seed and propagate from it very easily. It does seem to me that the flowering of bamboos is one of the most extraordinary events in the whole botanical world. Amazing. Now, in the rest of our jungle garden, it would have been lovely if we could have kept the tree ferns all winter, because they have, of course, the most wonderful structure, but they're just not hardy enough. So we've protected them, both of them, in 2 different ways. The conventional method is to stuff the sort of cone in the middle of the ferns with straw or bracken or something like that, and that stops ice forming and forms a sort of protective barrier. And we've also tried this proprietary bag, this fleece bag that goes over the top. Now, I just want to check and see. I reckon now by the beginning of May they should be okay. Well, the ferns themselves have died back, so they've obviously been hit by frost. But there is some greenness in there. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. I mean, obviously we'd like to see new growth, and then we'll know. But I'll keep an eye out, and certainly if it looks frosty, we'll cover that up again. This one here, you can take its cap off. It's a bit rotten in there, which is not great. We cut all the ferns back, but I think that'll be okay. At the back here, the passion flowers have completely died back, but it doesn't mean to say the plant is dead. So the thing to do is to start cutting it back until you hit green wood. But all this has to come off.
Well, our hard landscaping's complete in my new garden from cuttings, seed and division. What do you think of this? This is a sort of viewing platform. I'm going to have a seat here so that you're right in the midst of the flowers. And what flowers? My garden's going to rely on divisions, big herbaceous clumps that are really going to form the backbone of the garden. What have I got? I've got this fabulous helenium. This is Rausch topaz. It's a sort of amber bronze. It's a really rich, beautiful colour, and I want lots of oranges and purples in there. And this lovely Antipodean grass, this Stipa arundinacea. It's just beautiful, just the right colour with all that orange and olive green in it. Now's the last possible time, really, that you can actually transplant divisions. So I'm going to start with these heleniums.
Right, I come bearing gifts into your very plush, smart garden.
Yeah, this viewing platform is wonderful, isn't it?
Very smart.
Yeah.
Tell me, have you ever grown bamboo from seed?
Never. I've grown all sorts of grasses, but I've never had a try with bamboo.
No. Well, it looks like we may get a chance. Anyway, this isn't bamboo. This is from the nursery bed. It's echinops. Any use to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Spirocephalum, is it?
It is. You said that a lot better than I would have done. It's a tongue twister.
Well, it's just what I need, really. Give me some height at the back of the border and good colour too.
OK. Now, you may not be tempted to try growing bamboo from seed, but here are some other jobs you can get on with this weekend.
As the weather is warming, keep your eye out for pests and diseases. Our citrus plants in the greenhouse are being attacked by scale insects. These can be found on the underside of the leaves and are associated with the sooty moulds that grows on the honeydew. To control them is really easy. Use an organic soft soap solution and wipe the scale insects off with a cloth.
Keep an eye out for lily beetles over the next few weeks, which may be eating away both at your emerging lily shoots and also fritillaries. And the best way to deal with them is to seek them out, pick them off by hand, and destroy them however you think fit.
Deadhead tulips and daffodils regularly. If you don't, they'll spend precious energy trying to set seed. They need it all for the leaves. All the goodness from the foliage will eventually be absorbed by the bulbs, helping to swell them for a really good show next spring.
Any regular viewer of this programme will know that compost in all its forms is a subject of infinite fascination for me. So you can imagine my excitement when I learned that the compost bus was going to pay us a visit here at Berryfields. I think most people now agree that composting is a good thing. And in fact, a third of all our household waste could easily be composted. And that clearly is going to help the garden, help waste recycling, and it's not going to harm anybody. It's getting better. More and more people are composting. Latest figures, I think, are 34% of households regularly do it, but there's clearly scope for improvement. And this bus will be promoting the virtues of composting all next week. It sets out from Kew on Sunday and wends its way gently towards the Malvern Spring Show, arriving there on Saturday and staying all weekend. And if you want to know its route and whether you've got a chance to see it, just check out our website. Well, it's nice to see compost on the road.
I knew you'd approve. It's a bright, colourful bus, man. It's your sort of thing.
I tell you what, you can't go wrong with compost. Compost and a bright bus, you're on a winner. That's
Absolutely.
Good. It's really good. You know, what I realise is, and this is one of the exciting things about making any garden, is although we've lived with it for a year, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen the flowering.
Well, we planted it in stages, and now this is, really got some good shape to it. So we're seeing everything working together and the timing coming together as well.
And some things, I mean, look at those Ribes odoratum. They're just loving it.
Yeah. And these viburnums smell fabulous.
Yeah, well, that is really almost overpowering, actually. Do you know what it smells like? It smells like jasmine.
It does smell like jasmine. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And loads more to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the exciting thing. But not from us tonight, I'm afraid. That's the end of tonight's programme. We'll be back at our normal time next week, but not here at Berryfields either. We shall be at the Malvern Spring Show, which is the first of the RHS really big shows, and my local show. It's one of my favourites. And I'll be checking out a new innovation there, which is a grand pavilion geared just towards specialist exhibitors, and there are 24 of those. And also we're meeting up with Rachel. First time this year. Yeah, Rachel and I are going to go around the show gardens, and we're looking forward to that. And be good to see Rachel as well. Yeah. And there's also a whole new feature as well. There's a border competition, and I'm one of the judges, so I'm looking forward to that. One of the judges? Yeah. OK, well, you obviously can't miss that. So join us then, 8:30 next Friday. Bye-bye. I'm afraid the glorious weather of the last few days is going to change. And in fact, changeability is the theme for this weekend, dominated by some very heavy showers. On Saturday, these will mainly be in the north of England and Scotland. However, nowhere is completely safe. And on Sunday, the rain will move back and settle over the east of the country. But wherever you are, brace yourself for some very heavy, even thundery showers, and also some cooler weather with it.